Good morning, dear students. Students, today we are going to start another play from your snapshot book, that is the Mother's Day. And students, this play is written by J.B. Priestley and reveals how a mother's efforts are ignored by her family. It also narrates how the family members who worked 8-hour shifts a day look upon her although she worked for the whole day and all week. Right? So, this following poem is a humorous portrayal of the status of the mothers in a family. So, let us read on to see how Mrs. Pearson's family reacts when she tries to stand up for her own rights. So, first of all, we will discuss about the characters, that is Mrs. Annie Pearson, George Pearson, Doris Pearson, Cyril Pearson, and Mrs. Fitzgerald. Right. So, students, the action takes place in the living room of the Pearson's house in a London suburb. Suburb means it's a commercial residence, you can see, right? So, first scene, what is the scene, right? The time, that is the present time, right? So, scene is there. The living room of Pearson's family afternoon. It is a comfortably furnished, much lived in a room, a small suburban semi-detached villa. Villa means a huge house, right? If necessary, only one door need to be used, but it is better with two. One up left leading to the front door and the stairs, and the other in the right wall leading to the kitchen and the back door. There can be a muslin covered window in the left wall and possibly one in the right wall too. The fireplace is assumed to be in fourth wall, and there is a settee upright in armchair down left, one down right. A small table with two chairs either side of it stands at the center. When the curtain rises, it is afternoon in early autumn and the stage can be well lit. Right? Mrs. Pearson at right and Mrs. Fitzgerald at left are sitting opposite each other at the small table on which are two teacups and saucer and cards which Mrs. Fitzgerald has been telling Mrs. Pearson's fortune. Mrs. Pearson is a pleasant but worried looking woman in her 40s. 40s, that is talking about the age, right? So, Mrs. Fitzgerald is older, heavier and a strong sinister personality. She is smoking. It is very important that these have sharply contrasting voices. Mrs. Pearson speaking in a light, flurried sort of tone with a touch of suburban cockney perhaps, and Mrs. Fitzgerald with a deep voice, rather Irish perhaps. That means this was the introduction of the when curtain rises, what was the status, what was the scene there. So, this was all about that, right? So, first of all, we will start from the first statement made by Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Fitzgerald, collecting up the cards, and that's all I can. So, what's it? Collecting up the cards, and that's all I can tell you. Mrs. Pearson, could be a good fortune, could be a bad one, all depends on yourself now. Make up your mind, and there it is. So, students, this story begins with Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald sitting opposite each other and Mrs. Pearson's place, right? So, Mrs. Fitzgerald is a fortune teller and she is supposedly seen Mrs. Pearson's fortune. Thus, she continues to say that she has told her all that it within capacity to tell. The same reading can work in a positive way if Mrs. Pearson's actions are in sync with it, or it could turn out to be bad too. Right. So, Mrs. Pearson said, yes, thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I am much obliged. I am sure it's wonderful having a real fortune teller living next door. Did you learn that out east too? Right. So, Mrs. Pearson expresses her gratitude towards Mrs. Fitzgerald for having seen her fortune and shares how great it is to have someone like her around. She then asks her if Mrs. Fitzgerald has learnt these art of fortune telling him from the east. Means वहाँ पे अब भी बात हो रही है कि क्या आपने ये कहाँ से सीखा इसको, पूर्वी दिशा से. Even means she was talking about the directions, and maybe she is making a comment over it, right? So Mrs. Fitzgerald, I did 12 years I had of it with my old man rising to be lenient quartermaster. He learnt a lot and I learnt a lot more. But will you make up your mind now, Mrs. Pearson dear? Put your foot down once and for all and be the mistress of your own house and the boss of your own family, right? So Mrs. Fitzgerald answered that she did learn the art from the East for at 12 years, while her father was climbing the ladder to become a lieutenant quartermaster. She was learning this when, and then she motivates Mrs. Pearson to stand for herself and get respect, and the respect that she deserves, right? And Mrs. Pearson, smiling apologetically, that's easier said than done. Besides, I am so fond of them, even if they are so thoughtless and selfish, they don't mean to be, right? So Mrs. Fitzgerald cutting in, maybe not, but if it would be better for them if they learned to treat you properly, right? Mrs. Pearson said, yes, I suppose it would, in a way. So Mrs. Fitzgerald, no doubt about it all, who is the better for being spoiled grown man, lad or girl? Nobody. You think it doesn't am good when you run after them all the time, take their orders as if you were the servant in the house, stay home every night while they go out enjoying themselves. Never in all your life. It's the ruin of them as well as you. Husbands, sons, daughters should be taking notice of wives and mothers, not giving them orders and treating them like dirt. And don't tell me you don't know what I mean, for I know more than you have told me, right? So Mrs. Pearson apologetically here just smiling. Mrs. Pearson replies to Mrs. Fitzgerald advice by telling her it's far more difficult than it sounds. This is because she loves her family. Even if they ignore her needs, she loves to provide them for them, even if they are self-centered. चाहे परिवार जैसा भी हो, but she was happy with them, right? And Mrs. Fitzgerald wants Mrs. Pearson to realize that it is not difficult if she really tries. Moreover, she thinks it would add to their well-being as well if they behaved with love and respect with her. Mrs. Pearson agrees with that what Mrs. Fitzgerald has to say. And Mrs. Fitzgerald say they need to learn to treat Mrs. Pearson certainly. She further adds that none of them, either husbands, daughter or son, have turned out positively as a result of being spoiled by Mrs. Pearson. She enables her to see how running after them, handing them things, doing all their tasks for them and staying home while they enjoy a night is harmful for Mrs. Pearson as well as her family. She further explains how it should be the other way round. The family must treat wives and mothers with full respect and be after them instead of throwing orders. So Mrs. Fitzgerald bluntly tells Mrs. Pearson not to act unknown. She is completely aware of the situation. So Mrs. Pearson dubiously keep dropping a hint. Mrs. Fitzgerald hint, it's more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Pearson dubiously, I suppose it is, but I do hate any unpleasantness and it is so hard to know where to start. I keep making up my mind to have it out with them, but somehow I don't know how to begin. She glances at her watch at a clock. Oh, good gracious, look at the time. Nothing ready and they will be home any minute and probably all in hurry to go out again. Right? As she about to rise, Mrs. Fitzgerald reaches out across the table and pulls her down. Mrs. Fitzgerald, let them wait to look after themselves for once. This is where your foot goes down. Start now. C lights a cigarette from one she had just finished. So first of all, you will write the meaning of dubiously. D-U-B-I-O-U-S-L-Y. Dubiously means with hesitation. जैसे कभी कभी आपके मन में हिचकिचाहट हो, like that, right? So Mrs. Pearson hesitantly says that she often tries to give her and the family clues in between the conversations. So Mrs. Fitzgerald trying to make her understand that it's high time and Mrs. Pearson's family should respect her now, and that would require more than just clues. They need to be brought on track. And Mrs. Pearson understands what Mrs. Fitzgerald is trying to say, but she can't stand giving them any discomfort. She wants to clear it out with her family and take her stand by she just don't know how to take first step. Just as he is saying this, she notices it's time for everyone to come back home. Immediately, she gets worried about how nothing is ready for them to come home and they probably have to rush out again. She tries to get up and make arrangements for her family. Mrs. Fitzgerald stop her to do. And what she says, very easily, while lighting another cigarette, she asks Mrs. Pearson to begin at the very moment. She tells her to stop providing for them all the time and let them experience what it feels like to do on their own, right? And Mrs. Pearson embarrassed Mrs. Fitzgerald. I know you mean well. In fact, I agree with you, but I just can't. And it's no use trying to make me. If I promise you, I would really have it out with them. I know I would not be able to keep my promise. Then Mrs. Fitzgerald. Then let me do it. Mrs. Pearson, flustered. Oh no, thank you very much, Mrs. Fitzgerald, but that would not do at all. It could not possibly be somebody else. They would resent at it at once and would listen, and really I couldn't blame them. I know I ought to do it, but you see how it is. She looks apologetically across the table, smiling rather miserably, right? So even though in the hearts of hearts, Mrs. Pearson knows that Mrs. Fitzgerald is right, but she tells her that it is almost impossible for her to obey it, right? So she feels that there is no point in giving a promise she won't be able to keep. Then Mrs. Fitzgerald asks Mrs. Pearson to let her do hard part and teach Mrs. Pearson's family a lesson. Flustered means agitated or confused, you can see, भ्रमित जिसको की कहा जाता है. And resent, R-E-S-E-N-T, right? So that is called feel bitterness, यानी कुछ अलग सा महसूस होना, right? So Mrs. Pearson tells her that she doesn't think it's a good idea. She says so because she knows that they might react to changed behavior at first, but then would ignore it and resort to their old ways. Also, Mrs. Pearson doesn't blame them for this. She feels stuck because she knows it needs to be done, but it's unable to do it.